The people who lived in the middle of the tall trees knew much about the Seminoles because the Seminoles had once been a part of the Creek people before they had broken off to form their own nation. And the Seminoles gave sanctuary to Negroes, taking them into their villages. They mated with Negroes too. And so if this young man with mildew-smelling clothes was seeking the Seminoles, that meant that he was not free. Though slavery wasn't legal yet in that territory, that would come years later. There were ways that the English or Scottish people who were in this place got around the law. And one of those finagling men owned this young Negro, which meant that somebody might come looking for him, and that somebody might try to cause trouble. Ordinarily, that would mean the people in the place in the middle of the tall trees should take hold of the young man, carry him back east over the Oconee River, and collect a reward from the English or Scottish person who owned him. Yet the young man had mentioned that a very small man had pulled him out of the river. Could this mean the young man had encountered one of the little people? These were supernatural beings, and when they chose to show themselves, it was a very serious matter indeed. The small man would not be happy if this chosen young man was betrayed.
I'm sorry, I'm over here trying to unmute myself. Honorée.
Hey, Sister Angela.
Let me let you all know, I'm so excited. She and I haven't had a chance to have a verbal conversation. We've just been able to text, so I've not been able to say out loud to her, sis, I'm so happy and proud for you for this moment. You have worked so hard and you deserve every accolade that is happening to you. And know that I have been crying right along with you and laughing. And I just want you to start us off by telling us, what is it like to get that infamous phone call from Oprah Winfrey?
Well, it's surreal because nobody had warned me that she was going to call. So yeah, nobody had said a word. And you know, there's so much secrecy, you know, it's cloaked in secrecy. It's very much like a small group of us, I think maybe 82, 90, you know, people, and some of us are no longer living. So then it's an even smaller group. So you know, I've talked about this before, but for those, you know, who didn't see me on the TV, and I'm glad. I was so nervous. I was just like, oh my God, what if I belch on, you know, national TV or whatever? But I saw this unknown number on my phone, right? I'm looking down at my hand like I'm holding my phone. And, you know, I was like, I'm not answering that. Who is this? Because I have like a really weird ex-boyfriend who will, like, you know, call every now and then, you know, even though I have told him I don't want to talk to him or whatever. And then also, you know, I pay my bills now. It's taken a long time for me to be able to pay my bills on time, right? That only happened a few years ago. So I knew I wasn't a bill payer. So I was just like, who is this? So I just ignored it. And so then the number came back around. And I said, I'm gonna say something to this person. Okay. So I answered the phone and I'm like, hello. And this woman said, hello, may I speak to Honorée Jeffers? And I said, with whom am I speaking? And the voice, you know, very serene, like not, you know, upset at all. And she said, is this Honorée Jeffers? And I said, who is this? And she said, this is Oprah Winfrey. And I said, no, it's not. And she said, yes, it is. And I said, no, it's not. Stop playing on my phone. Or something I said,
Yeah.
She said, in that voice that we all know, and you and I, Sister Angela, you're a couple of years younger than me, but we grew up
With that iconic voice.
With that iconic voice. And she said, this is Oprah Winfrey, Professor Jeffers. And I said, oh my God, and I just kept going on. And I was just like, why would Oprah be calling me?
It still didn't hit you that she's calling you about the.
No.
Well, girl, what did you think Oprah was calling you about?
Come on, I was just like, am I high? What is happening? Is this a fever dream? It was, because with so much time, it's very quickly happening. Right. And I was just like, why is Oprah Winfrey calling me? What does she want? And she said, and so I'm just, I'm just like, this is wonderful, but why would this lady be calling me? And so then, while I'm going, oh my God, I said, wait, let me get myself together. And she said, you are already together.
Come on, Oprah.
Wrote a beautiful novel or something like that. I mean, if somebody recorded it, those might not be, but I remember she said, you have written a beautiful novel. And I am choosing the love songs of W.E.B. Du Bois for the Oprah Book Club. And then I just started crying.
Girl.
Because you and I are both with subsidiaries of HarperCollins.
Right.
So, when you get that advance, you've already earned out your advance. When you get that advance, you're just like, okay, you happy for the money, but then you're like, am I going to earn out this advance?
Right.
So when she told me she was picking me for the book, I said, unless people really can't stand the book, I'm hopefully going to earn out this advance. And so that was the first thing I was thinking, right?
Really?
Yeah, the first thing I was thinking was, oh, I'm gonna, but so much was going through my head, right?
Right.
And the other thing I was thinking was, I had hopes and dreams for years that somehow this lady, who I had admired so much as a young girl, would pick my, but that's like winning the lottery.
Exactly. So many of us who write, we will say that in jest, because it's really, like you said, it's like winning the lottery.
It's like winning the lottery.
But you got that phone call, and so they made the announcement last week.
Yeah.
And let me tell you how things work. I'm normally rushing around getting ready to go to work, so I never get to watch the morning news. Something said to me, watch the morning news.
Really?
Today. So I'm sitting there slow poking around, and then they say, Oprah has picked her book. It's an epic book. You can ask my husband. I was running around like somebody in a Pentecostal church. I said, it's Honorée. They picked her book. They picked her book. And sure enough, it was your book. And I think if you cried more than me, then bless you, because you were crying. Because I was so happy.
The one thing, you and I are real friends, okay? The one thing that I can say, I've said this phrase several times, right? So as you know, Pony by Genuine is one of my favorite songs. But Genuine had another song called Same Old G. And that's who I am. I'm that same old G. I still got family in Talladega. You're from Anniston. Anniston Star just I think I was just as excited that the Anniston Star published a really great review as I was the New York Times and the Washington Post. That's, I'm from Georgia and Alabama, so this is home for me. My mother's people are from Eatonton, and my mom and my living sister and my niece and her family, they still live in Talladega. My day one, who is one of my best friends in the world, the great poet Jacqueline Allen Trimble, is from Montgomery, and lives in Montgomery. And I was just, visiting her in 2019. So I'm that same OG, and so the thing about it is that when you have people who know, I'm getting mushy for a little bit, who know, like you, what I've gone through, to, the kind of personal things I've gone through. My sister passed away in 2014. My marriage, ended in 2015. So it just feels good to have you say that and to know that you mean it.
Yeah.
And that we're supportive of each other, because just as you say you're proud of me, before, I didn't want to interrupt you while you were doing your thing, your interlocutor thing, right? But I'm very proud of you. You are a worker. I am a worker. So it feels really good, to hear you say that. And yeah, and to have Miss Oprah, who made so much possible for us as young Black women, who provided us a vocabulary. I don't necessarily want to talk about, that, but
Right.
who provided us a vocabulary for things that were very difficult. It was incredible. It just felt like coming home.
Yeah.
Just really
well,
did.
well, let's talk about this amazing book of yours and how it came about. The Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois. I mean, where did the title come first? Did he come first? Did the plot, did this beautiful little girl, Ailey Pearl, come first? What came first? How did you come up with this beautiful book?
Well, so, I've sort of talked about this before. I only wanted to write short stories. That's all I've ever wanted. Or before now, that's all I've ever wanted. Now, I think over the past 2 or 3 years, you're far more organized than I am. You outline, you do all that kind of stuff, right? But when, I knew that I was going to continue writing here, and there are things that I wanted to explore, right? So now I can say I want to write, at least 2 more novels, okay, set in Chickasetta. But initially, I only wanted to write short stories. I started writing short stories when I was at the MFA program at University of Alabama, where they tormented me greatly and and bullied me. I'm never going to say I had a great time.
The truth will set you free.
Right. They were really mean. They were really racist. They may have me on the department website, the MFA website, but that would be recent. As recently as 3 weeks ago, I was not, when the last time I checked or whatever. But I had some really good people who I was close with. Dr. Myron Tuman, who just wrote me, right? He was my mentor, whatever. So my point about being at University of Alabama was I started writing stories while I was there. And I had really good friends, Yvonne Jackson, Kavita Sharman, Josefina Pastora. I called us the colored left. I was the Black poet. Yvonne was the Black fiction writer. Kavita is Anglo East Indian, and Josefina is Nicaraguan. So while I was there, I was very lonely, and I started writing these stories about people that I imagined in the home, the place that I always viewed as home, which was my mother's hometown, Eatonton, Georgia. And so, I just was writing these stories, and they weren't very good, but, run along. I began to sort of, I guess, perfect my short story writing. So that's all I ever wanted to do. In 2005, I submitted a story that was written in the voice, the first person voice, in the Black vernacular, Southern Black vernacular, all vernacular, in the voice of Miss Jolene, who is in the book, right? Miss Jolene married to Mr. JW. And for the one story prize. I didn't expect to win, and I didn't, but out of 5,000 entrants, they got 10 honorable mentions, and then they had their one winner. And as part of your being a finalist, honorable mention, or whatever they called it, they sent my work to literary agents. Sarah Burns, the great Sarah Burns, is my literary agent and so when she got with me, I just really liked her vibe, and she told me that I should write a novel. And I said, well, I don't want to write a novel. I just only want to write short stories. And she told me there's no money in short stories. And I could tell that she was like, you're going to have to make this money. And I knew I was going to have to make money to keep her. So I lied, and I told her I was going to write a novel. But I had no idea how to do that. Run along. After she basically called me on the fact that I was not actually writing a novel, I had a short story that I'd written about Ailey Pearl. And I said, okay, I'm going to extend this, and people laugh, and I'm going to make it a beach read. That's what I set out to write, a commercial beach read, light, no kind of serious issues, right? And then what happened was probably about 2 years in, I probably would have remembered this before the pandemic, but time has no meaning.
Absolutely no.
I began to have dreams about this place, this plantation. I could see the house in the distance, and people would come up to me. I had dreams where I would wake up speaking another language. And I had met Native American people in my dreams. And so I would wake up and I would just write these snippets down. And after, I guess, maybe 2 years, that's when I realized these were Ailey's ancestors. And so that's when I began to figure out, which it was a hot mess for probably about 5 or 6 years, about how, I would weave these two stories. And the thing about Dr. Du Bois was Uncle Root was just supposed to be a minor character, in and out, because I've got people who just come in, come out.
Right.
But there was something about him. He was kind. And he was a safe space for Ailey. And when I knew that I was going to be incorporating some different, thank you. Someone says, love Uncle Root so much. Uncle Root is like a fan favorite. I love him so much. He's kind. He gets her.
Yeah.
He accepts her exactly the way that she is. I mean, and she's got, she's like a ball of emotions constantly, very little impulse control sometimes. And he just knows how to smooth her right out, you know. So initially, I just wanted this one thing about when he met the great W.E.B. Du Bois. But then I began to think about it after I have the novel whisperer, I call him the novel whisperer, Liz Van Hoos, who said, I would love to hear this story more, right? And that it would change throughout, you know, and you know how old folks do that, Angela, old Black people, they tell one story and then, you know, 5 years later, you like, but that's not what you said. And they were like, whose story is this? This is my story. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and Uncle Root and other characters. I said, you know, regardless of what your intentions were, they had some very specific intentions that they were going to be seen and heard. And Uncle Root was definitely one of those characters that said, yeah, you may want me to be a minor character, but guess what? I got stories to tell, sis. So you just keep typing.
You just keep typing. And I mean, it's interesting because the great Toni Morrison, you know, who I worship, she would always say she wouldn't let her characters do their own thing. And I would try to do that, but I realized there is but one Toni Morrison.
Right.
And I am not she, right? I am not Toni Morrison. And so, yeah, they had their, you know, their own ideas. And so when I began thinking about W.E.B. Du Bois, again, it was maybe about 3 or 4 years in that I began to see that Du Bois and his racial theories and all of the work, I mean, you and I are African Americans of a certain age, you can't get past W.E.B. Du Bois in Black intellectual life. And when I began to think about what he did for our people, and I knew that this was going to be a story of a people, right? I began to think about his writings as frames for each section so that there would be a thread that was moving, you know, that was taught, because I knew that that it was going to move back, it was going to toggle back and forth between, you know, Ailey's present and history. And I knew that there had to be a connective, you know, thread. And that's how I came up with Dr. Du Bois.
But talk about, it wasn't just that there was that thread or his ideology going through the stories. You literally allowed historical figures and fictional characters to bump into each other and have relationships and conversations. Where do you get that comfortability? Because those of us that write historical fiction, we know there's a fine dance that you have to dance when you start, you know, letting the real mess with the fictional. So when did you make that decision that these characters are going to have relationships with W.E.B. Du Bois and other historical figures?
Well, one of the things I'm very careful to tell people, this is not an autobiographical novel. I think because the characters do feel so real to some people, which is so wonderful to my heart, right? That they're like, and I think about the great Ernest Danes, who would say, people actually thought Miss Jane Pittman was a real person, thought Miss Jane Pittman was a relative, you know, an ancestor of his. But I say that to preface what I'm about to say now, and that is, I thought about my dad, right, who I had a difficult relationship with, but there were many gifts that I received from him, right? And my father was somebody that I call like a Negro Forrest Gump, all right? You remember in Forrest Gump was always meeting these famous people. My father was the same way. He would have these encounters with famous people. For example, Ossie Davis, the great actor Ossie Davis, and my father were in the same army company. Okay.
Yeah.
Daddy talked about how he was at something during the 60s, right? And Muhammad Ali came and sat down next to him and shook his hand and told him he loved his poetry. Daddy was at the high school. I don't know if they still have this high school, but Tuskegee University, which was Tuskegee Institute back then, had a high school. And Daddy had attended that high school, and he would tell the story at least once a month. He was walking down this road, little dirt road, you know how it is in the country, and he was reading, and George Washington Carver stopped him and said, "You should not read and walk at the same time, you'll hurt your eyes." So there were all of these moments. The one that really blows my mind is during World War II, which my father was one of the, first wave, of commissioned naval officers, maybe the 5th or 6th commission, not naval, Army officers. And he was a 2nd lieutenant. There was a lot of racial strife, okay, during that time. And so what would happen is anytime, I mean, they do this now, anytime a Black man would get into something with a a Black soldier or naval officer would get into something with a white soldier or a white naval officer, it was always the Black guy's fault. So my father was jumped by, I think it was 4. There's a newspaper article about it. 4 enlisted men, even though he was a commissioned officer. They called him the N-word, and then they jumped on him and beat him up. And he was court-martialed. They didn't do anything to the white guys. And his defense attorney was Thurgood Marshall. Now, when Mama told me this, you can't ever accuse your mom of,
Stretching the truth or something.
Right. We're Black and Southern. We do not use the word lie, okay, when it comes to our moms. So when she told me this, I was like, yeah, okay. But I didn't say anything. I was doing research. And as I'm wont to do, sometimes I just do random research and then it'll start coalescing after a year or two. And that's when I found out that Thurgood Marshall had been the lead attorney for the NAACP during World War II, and that he would fly different places to defend these Black men.
Right.
And then I found letters that my daddy had written his mom, and Thurgood Marshall was his defense attorney, like for real. So there were these moments all along the way. And I started thinking about what I said once in a short story, that it's a small world for other people, but for Black folks, it's nothing but a backyard barbecue. Yeah. I know this has happened to you. We will meet somebody and we start talking, and within 15 minutes, we will find people that we know in common, right? Your cousin, da, 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 da. So that's what I wanted to indicate, the intimacy of the national Black community, right? That there's a larger community, and then there are these small communities. And that's how I came up with that.
Well, it's a testament to your passion for truth telling, but history. I don't know if everyone has heard of the American Antiquarian Society and even know what it means in terms of having had 14 US presidents.
Yes.
And you were, was it elected or?
Yes. I was elected. They have to elect, they have a ballot. And now that I am a member, I've seen this ballot, right? And mostly when you come up for the ballot, everybody already knows, who you are, blah, blah, blah. There's been a couple, 3 infamous times that people have said no. And that's when somebody put up President Richard Nixon. They were like, absolutely not. Right. And so they did not elect him into, but I'm the greatest thrill was when I ran into the man that used to be the director of the Schomburg. And I was just like, so you meet, David McCullough, the historian David McCullough with his wonderful gravelly voice. I have such a crush on him. So yeah, it's a big deal. And I was shocked because I am a poet. And at that time I was not a novelist. I was working on a novel, but I didn't really feel like I could call myself a novelist until, somebody wanted to publish my novel. So yeah, it's history is very important to me,
And you connect so many dots in this novel. I mean, it's not just the story of an African American. It's not just the story of former slaves. You also bring in Native American culture. You let us see, you connect us back to Africa. Why is it so important to you? For those of you that have read, your book on Phyllis Wheatley Peters, we see from there how important it is for you to take us beyond the shores of America, but take us to our true past. Why is that so important to you in your writing, to connect all of those pieces?
I think it's important because, to be honest, when I first started doing historical research, it was just, I was curious. I've always been a nerd. An ex-lover of mine called me once derisively Black library girl, or library girl. And I took that as a compliment.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, my handle on Twitter is BLK. Right. Someone says your Twitter handle. Yeah. I didn't take that as an insult. I've always been smart. I think typically anyone that you see of any racial background who has written a book was a smart kid and was a reader. Okay.
Right.
So, but there, but I guess I was in my 40s. It was when I'd always been interested in history, but it was when I went to the American Antiquarian Society in the summer of 2009. Okay. Elizabeth Watts Pope. It says to everyone, yes, of the American Antiquarian Society. It was when I went there and I saw other people who were just as passionate about history that I felt like I found a tribe, right? People of different races, and even though, a lot of the folks that I was friends with and remain friends with are white, they knew so much about African American history, right? But I think that it wasn't until I went there and I encountered, we don't say found, John Peters alive on the 1796, that I understood that this was a path for me. It wasn't simply a hobby, that this was a path for me. And then I spent, however long figuring out what did this path mean. But in terms of why I'm interested in the history of, Black folks who are here now, what we're seeing now is an echo of American history, for not just African Americans, not just Native Americans, but white Americans who are not necessarily their best. Okay. This is what we're seeing. We're seeing And even though what happened, and then I'm going to get back to, the core of your question, even though what happened on January 6th, when those white supremacist terrorists broke into the Capitol, and they used the rallying charge, rallying call 1776. It was a terrifying thing. I'd like for us to consider that what we think about as a tidy revolution that took place in 1776 was actually very violent and very terrifying as well. And it wasn't until people started to use this rhetoric. But when you're in history, it's messy.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look back on it, that's when you can say, oh, that meant this, or this is what happened, or this was a glorious moment. It wasn't. It was infamous in many, many ways. One of the biggest ways is that even though it was a revolution for quote unquote freedom, people were not concerned about the freedom of African Americans. Okay. People were not concerned about the fact that Native Americans were having their land stolen. And lest we forget, there were Native Americans who fought on the revolutionary side, as well as African Americans who fought on the revolutionary side. So when we look at history as this sort of messy thing that's happening at the moment that we don't understand as history at the time, that's what I want to think about with my characters. And when I write poetry about it, that history is not this sort of glorious moment or even this horrible moment. When we think about, it's horrible, but no one's thinking, I'm going to commit genocide against Native Americans. What is happening is you have people who are letting the worst parts of their nature take hold. And they do that once, and then they do that again. And then that pushes a barrier aside. And then that pushes a barrier aside. And then that pushes a barrier aside, okay? When we think about the best parts of history, when we think of, for example, the African-American civil rights movement, right? Although there have been movements with Native Americans and other BIPOC groups, as well as LGBTQ individuals, civil rights, it's incremental, right? Somebody says, I'm not putting up with this anymore. I'm doing X, Y, and Z. And then somebody looks at that, and then they keep going forward, and then they keep going forward. And in those moments, Angela, is history. And in those moments, there is a way to look at human nature. And for me, my ministry, right, is depicting those moments so that we understand that we're all in history. If God says the same, we're going to get past this pandemic. Okay. Yeah. And 5 years later, we're going to be looking back on these significant moments.
Yes. So we have a few questions.
Okay.
I'm enjoying this so much. And I know everybody is also, I'm sure, as riveted as I am. I wanted to just,
hey, Jontine. Hey, Carmen. I'm sorry, Kristen.
No, you are good. We have a few questions on the Q&A. Honorée, I don't know if you want to just read those and field those, and I can let you do that if you see them. If not, I'm happy to read them out.
Okay. Okay. Jody says, did you, and I do want to get to, so I'm going to try to be succinct about Afro-Indigeneity. I think that's incredibly important. Jody, and I typically don't call people I don't know by their first name without a handle, so excuse me.
Jody Lisberger. She's actually a former teacher of mine. So
okay, Miss Jody. Did you ever feel that your historical research was overwhelming you and the novel? What advice can you offer to writers about dealing with historical details? One of the things that I would give the advice, and I have seen Sister Angela do the same, you cannot let your historical details overwhelm your story or your characters, okay? But you do need to think about what, like I've seen, and of course, I'm not going to be shady and say this novel or this novel, or but I've seen people who are not acting. If you have a character that is acting against laws or social mores or what have you of their time, you can't just have them do that. There has to be character development to show why they would do that, why they would act against what is the common sort of a behavior of the time. Okay, so what I do is I do enough research. I mean, and it always bothers me when I hear people say, I just didn't do too much research. I didn't want it to bog down my novel. And that's why your novel is going to be a hot mess if you don't, right? You can't impose, we call it in history, although I'm not a historian, I'm a scholar, we call it presentism. You cannot take what you view and map it on to what your characters are going to view. The way I got beyond that in terms of using my point of view to remark on gender issues and all of that in the songs is that I had a collective timeless narrator. And so the narrator would be able to judge, right? Be like, that's wrong. While the character himself or herself or themselves would not. So I think that that's the thing. I think you don't want to get so bogged down in details that you can't move it forward, but you do need to know your milieu. You must. You cannot be coming, and particularly in the South, you cannot come into the South trying to impose, you know, your kumbaya, whatever, on the South. The South was horrible. The way that and it is still my home. There's a moment in the book where a character says about another character who's from the North, born in the city, something, something, something. You know, he didn't know that a place could hurt, that you could long for a place, even when it had hurt you so badly. Okay. So I love the South, but we have to be honest about the South. Okay. We cannot lie about the South to make other people feel good. We just can't do that, because what's going to happen is anger is going to bubble up, right? And that's why Black people stay mad. That's why Native American people stay mad, because all of this is their land. You know, this was no frontier. You can't come up into somebody's house where they got furniture and all of that talking about, look at this empty house, right? It's not empty. There were people. And then I'd like to move to Kelsey. Can you share about your research into the history of Afro-Indigeneity? This is an excellent question as well. Why was it important for you to include that? Well, the Southeastern states, for many Black people in the Southeastern states, you know, people can talk about DNA all they want to. Let's keep it real. One of the reasons I don't pay any attention to that, Native American people do not get DNA tests. That's the thing. I live out here in Oklahoma, right? This is Native American Central. They don't get DNA tests. They don't believe in DNA tests for the most part, because DNA is not culture. Okay. DNA is not culture. So people say, well, there aren't but a few African Americans who have Native American DNA. Again, you know, Native American people don't get DNA. Second of all, most of the Native American ancestry is maternal. So you can slough off ancestors as you move through the DNA process. Maybe at some point they'll come up with a test that can, you know, catch those sloughed off, you know, ancestors. But in my family, on both sides, it is claimed that we have Native American blood. Now, I'm not sure it was Cherokee on my mother's side, as a dear former student of mine who's now a professor, Rain C. Gomez, said she calls it Creekakee, right? So Cherokee is up north, then there's a tribal border, and then in Eatonton, where my mother's people are from, there are Creek people, but that border could be porous. Okay, that border could be porous. So then on my father's side, his great grandmother was named Mahala, which is a well-known name that is on the DAWS roll, which is the census of the Southeastern tribes. So, and Eatonton is like Black Indian Central. Okay, there are so many. For example, there's a bunch of people with the last name Driscoll. Okay, Driscoll is a well-known Cherokee last name. So it was very important to me to have that, but I was scared. For the I guess 50 pages or something like that you see on you know, Native American Afro-Indigenous culture, that took me about 7 years of research. And I was scared that I was going to be dragged. One of the ways, because people are always writing in very exoticist, inappropriate fashion about Native American culture. I was really careful. I wanted to be respectful, but I also wanted to be true to the characters. So one of the ways that I did that was I made everybody mixed race. All the indigenous characters are either Black and Native American, or white and Native American, or all three, okay? So a colleague of mine who's also a dear friend texted me. I was scared to even tell her the book was out, but she follows me on Twitter. And she got the book and she texted me and she said, you know, you really got it. You really, you know, you channeled the ancestors. And I cried because I was so grateful, because you just don't want to kick dirt in the face of your ancestors. And I have been accepted by several Native American scholars as kin, right? And that, it feels really good to me. But I'm very careful because I was reared as African American to be, you know, respectful.
There's an author that talks about the dangers of dipping your pen in someone else's blood.
That's right.
So there's always got to be that respect level. I'm not sure how much time we have
Yes,
left.
I don't either.
You and I could talk for the rest of the evening.
That's right. We really could.
We'll let our friend from Thank You Books come back in and let us know where we are and what we need to do.
Well, I'm happy if anyone out there has a question for Honorée or Angela. We could probably do 1 or 2 more questions before we wrap up. Y'all can use the chat or Q&A feature. I've been just,
you know, there seem to be only 2 of them. So
yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah, if anyone's shy. I'm wondering too, you know, chances are many people are still reading the book.
Yes.
And I'm happy that I always,
it's a chubby baby. It's my big fat, chubby baby.
Well, and I'm reluctant to, I think that authors should be able to speak freely about their work, but given that this has heft and it's still so new, I'm glad that I don't think we've
No
had any
spoilers.
tonight.
We haven't had any spoilers. I
Uh-uh.
have been concerned
Mm-hmm.
that there are people who just will do the spoilers. And I'm just like, please stop doing that.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, no, we weren't going to do
No.
spoilers tonight.
You should not speak. I mean, it's the 800-page book, so you don't need to go any further than 300.
Mhm.
Page 300. Stop telling everybody. Thank you, Haley. I appreciate those good words.
I see some more questions, I
Yeah, we
think.
got a couple more questions that have come through.
Okay, so let's answer these. All right.
So, yeah.
What is your next book project in the works? I am working on essays about, thank you, John King. I love you, my brother, about Black women, history, and the intersection of the personal and the political. That is, I think, a thing that I do well. I don't do everything well, right? I don't think I'm ever going to be able to write a beach read. I would like to write a beach read, but my Grim Reaper is just going to it's just gonna come out. So
that train has left the station. I just don't know.
Don't make fun of me, Sister Angela, but it's true. That train has left the station. But if you read it on the beach, it could be a beach read, right?
There you go.
But yes, so I'm working on essays, and then we will return to Chickasetta, and there are short stories about some of the small characters that appeared, who are very important in crafting this sort of universe. There's the first book I wanted was, going to be the most serious book, the longest book. I knew that. And it was going to create a universe so that if you've read that universe, you know the history, right?
Right.
Nikisha, hey, Sister Nikisha, when did you feel that you were ready to write this book with all of the research you did in the character development? I was writing the book and researching at the same time. I'm not someone who, like, the word comes to me and I will write things down. And then what will happen is, if I'm researching and I realize I have made a mistake with the milieu, the historical milieu, then I will go back and I will change. My house is messy. This is the cleanest, part of the house. You can't see down here, but my house is just gross right about now. I was getting a housekeeping service before the pandemic, but now. So I'm not very organized, but what I do is I constantly take notes. So I have a notebook and I'll constantly take notes and be like, okay, remember, da, 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 da. And then I'll come back to these notebooks. I used to just have pieces of paper, but after a while I started keeping things in moleskins so that I can pull them down and flip through them, right? And I make sure that I have a date, something like that. So that's how I was able to do that. But the word comes first.
Yeah.
Always. The word, the idea, the people's voices come first. And then I began to think about how they interact with history. And I think this one last question: what sort of tools do you use in your writing process? What are the processes that keep you on track? I am not someone who, again, is very organized. I will tell you what keeps me on track. God.
Yeah.
I hear his voice throughout the day. If I don't pray formally every day. I speak to God every day. God wakes me up out of my sleep. So this to me is the way that I've survived, the way that I've found joy, the way that I've been able to name that which people are telling me doesn't exist is my writing. And so I hope to die with my boots on. I don't ever want to stop writing. My mentor, the great Lucille Clifton, had a book that came out after she passed away. She went into, the hospital for the last time with a book. And so that's how I want to be. And the other thing is, I just get sad if I'm not writing. If I'm not, and I'm sure Angela feels, the same way. I'm out of sorts when I'm not writing. If I don't do something at least once a week, even when I'm incredibly busy, like I am now, and to God be the glory, I'm very happy to be very busy, then I get really bereft. Okay. So, and then when I have, I'm in the thick of it, it'll wake me up at 4 o'clock, 4:30 in the morning. And I'm very, very grateful that that still happens. The last thing is you just have to keep it fresh.
Yeah.
It's like any relationship. You cannot be married to somebody, disappear for 2 or 3 months, and then come back home expecting fried chicken and macaroni and cheese. You know what I'm saying? You gotta stay in there even when you don't want to be bothered. So thank y'all so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this conversation. I so enjoyed this.
I love you so much, Angela.
I love you too, sis.
I love you.
Thank you both, Honorée and Angela. I feel like we got to witness this beautiful, intimate friendship, and I'm so grateful for being admitted into y'all's circle. And it's so clear the respect and admiration and love you have for one another. And
yes,
and I loved everything you managed to cover, from process and craft, related questions to the historical details, again, without giving away too much. So it's really an honor. It's been a total pleasure, and I know our audience feels the same. I'm going to drop in the chat our events calendar in case anyone out there is interested in looking at what we've got coming up. I'm going to send everyone off into their evenings with one more just strong piece of encouragement, which is to pick up this incredible book. I promise it will feel like the best kind of travel. And I know when people describe reading in that way, I'm always like, is that true? And in this case, it is. It's so absorbing. It's so enveloping. For as long as it is, I didn't want it to end. And truly, and I think that as we are transitioning into a new season, and we've had our time with our beach reads, and maybe our shorter fiction, it's just time to enter into a world that has depth and seriousness and also levity, and it's just brilliantly executed, and I know I'm better for it. So thank you, Honorée. Y'all, if you want to know what impresses Oprah, this does. So that's cool. We could all when are we not learning from Oprah? Anyway, thank you all, and thank you both especially. I hope that one day we meet in person.
Yes, because
nice.
because I would like to say, even virtually, it's good to be home.
Oh, yes, it is.
Yay. That makes us happy. Thanks for sharing yourselves. I did, like a dingbat, I didn't ask you before we started when we were in our little green room, but I hoped it would be okay if we recorded the conversation. We don't have.
I always assume that you do
Okay.
not. You
Okay,
do
great.
not. Now, you know, if you were some dude trying to romance me, all of a sudden I heard recording in progress, that would be a little concerning.
Yeah, I worried about that a little bit.
I always assume, yeah, that
if it's a firm no, I'll just delete it. We don't have a YouTube channel
absolutely,
yet,
you may
but
feel free.
I
Yeah.
think this would be so. I think it would be so wonderful. Especially, I know folks are probably so curious to hear about that. You know, that fabled phone call from Oprah.
Everybody asked me about it, but I don't think. But it seems like nobody gets tired of hearing that story.
I don't think so.
One of my friends who's African, he's from the Gambia. He called me and he said, if Oprah would just call my name just once, I could die happy, right? So yeah, it's a beautiful
across the world. Yeah, I think it's the universal, you know, it's the
I'm very blessed, and she's just been so kind and
That's
so
so wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. And I will, once I figure out how to you know, I might have my 12-year-old help us get on YouTube, and then we'll get it rolling. But thank you all. Thanks to everyone who attended tonight. And we look very forward to whatever each of you comes out with next.
Yay, thank you. Love you, sis.
Love you, sis.
Good night.
Good night.